Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor, our Discord server, 10 different channels plus stage shows. It's where you go for the most heat. Get off of Twitter. Everything interesting from there we put over here, and then you can comment on it. It's a much better format, and you're with the most hardcore Heat fans that you can find. So check it out, $2.99 per month. Link right here in the description, and you'll bypass the Apple upcharge. Also, check out Prize Picks. Use the code 5, FIVE. Not only will you get $50 to play right away, and it is legal in the state of Florida, but you can compete against us. I hate to say it, Greg has pulled ahead of me through 5 games of the NBA Finals. I got one more game to make it up. The good news is Alex and Brady are nowhere to be seen. Compete against us. Use the code 5, FIVE. Put down the 5. Get your 50. Again, it's prizepicks.com. And now, today's episode.
Mercy, luxurious, Heat Nation, yeah, Mercy and Lago, down to Biscayne, yeah, 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs, where here's the thing, you can check the score, hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs, down to Biscayne. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's about have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, welcome back to 5 on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick on 5 Reasons Sports. I got Bryan Fonseca. You can follow him at Bryan Fonseca NY. We continue to follow, I don't even want to call them developments, but just, I don't know, leaks, leverage
chatter,
plays. Posturing. That's a good word. In the Kevin Durant situation. So the latest as we speak, and we're recording this at around 4 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday, the Miami Heat are still in the mix. Now, I can report that because we really haven't reported anything different. But there's been reports from, let's say, Gambo out in Phoenix, who seems to be trying to help the Suns drum up a better offer. And then there are others like Shams who are now reporting San Antonio, not really in the mix. Again, Bill Simmons, I think, told us a deal was done with the Spurs 10 days ago. And then that essentially Miami and Houston have the best shot. As I understand it, the Heat have made their intentions clear to Phoenix on what they're willing to do. Phoenix asked for a lot more, and that's kind of where it's been. And it just seems to me, Brian, like the Suns are trying to drum up a market for a player who's almost 37 years old, 1 year left in his contract, wants a 2-year extension after that. Certain teams he really doesn't want to play for. It's kind of clear that Minnesota is one of them. I don't know if Toronto is another one, but we haven't really heard him express interest in going to Toronto. Seems to want to play for one of the Texas teams, but wouldn't mind playing for Miami. I think that's the way that I'm sort of interpreting the reporting that's out there. Of course, he doesn't make the final decision, but you don't want to acquire a player who's going to leave after a year necessarily. If it's a rental, you don't want to have to give up too much for a player who may leave. Now, in Toronto's case with Kawhi Leonard in 2019, it proved worth it. Most cases, it doesn't prove worth it. But what we're going to talk about today is this idea of making a value trade in the NBA, because Barry talks about this a lot, that the Heat have their price and they don't want to go above their price for a player. That, again, your first offer is never your best offer, but with the Heat, it seems to be pretty close to it, okay, in the way that they operate. Other teams, Orlando needs a 2-guard. They needed a third scoring option, and they wanted to get off of a couple contracts, so here's 4 first-round picks. The Heat don't necessarily do things that way, at least not recently. But there is some evidence, and so there's 2 questions I want to get into here. One is it possible to even make a value trade in the NBA now? Or is there always going to be one desperate team that gives a team what it wants, okay? We saw some of this with the Lillard situation. There's been others. Obviously, Mikal Bridges commanding 5 first-round picks. The Luka thing was totally out of the box because Nico never talked to anybody, the Dallas GM. He could have gotten a lot more, obviously, than he did get. But the second part of this is how the Heat have done in the past by holding to a number. And the evidence is that they've done fairly well in those cases, although it doesn't really account for players they might have had they gone a little deeper into it. So let's start with the NBA question first, then we'll get into the Heat. Is it possible to make a value trade in the NBA now if you're the team trying to acquire the player in the trade?
Sure, but it depends because value is kind of subjective. When you look across the league, it depends on the context of what does the team actually want to get out of this on both sides, and who the player is and what their contract situation is. Because we talked about Bane and Hero in the last episode. Bane's contract is actually an advantage because it's already signed. You don't have to worry about re-signing him. Whereas with Tyler Hero, for example, like you have to re-sign him. So the team who would be willing to trade for him, for example, would have to want to re-sign him. Same thing with Kevin Durant, you would think, because Kevin Durant is in line for one more big contract before he gets out of here, unless he's going to play till like 50 years old, which at this point, maybe he'll average 26, 6, and 6 when he's 50 years old too. Who knows? But it depends. Like if you look at one of the more recent trades that directly impact this NBA Finals, or two of them rather, one on each side, Alex Caruso, for example, goes for Josh Giddey. End of deal. Like that's it. And everyone was like, whoa, you couldn't, if you're the Bulls, you couldn't also have gotten a pick, a first, something.
Right.
Like, everyone was kind of stunned, like, oh, that's all that was. But for Chicago, it was enough to get a guy in Josh Giddey who's talented that they felt like they could build around, even though many of us were kind of like, Caruso might be better and it's going to help OKC become one of the best defensive teams in the league, all of which is what happened. And we've seen the impact of Alex Caruso ever since. And that's trading a sort of quote unquote rising young talent on their first contract for a dude who's been in the league for a while, who's just an excellent role player. And that may end up being a both sides win trade, depending on what happens with Giddey, who actually looked really good at times in Chicago last year. But ultimately, Caruso might help OKC win a championship because as of the time we're doing this, OKC's one win away from winning a title against a now hampered Tyrese Halliburton. And then if you look on the other side, there were two meaningful trades. Obviously, the famous one with Domantas Sabonis and Tyrese Halliburton, but another one that doesn't get talked a lot about enough is the Pascal Siakam one, where that one is probably more akin to what we're talking about here, where that one was Bruce Brown, Jordan Nwora, Kyra Lewis Jr., and 3 first-round picks for Siakam. And the Raptors have since they've done what they've done with their team. Say like they're still kind of figuring it out, but they traded for Brandon Ingram, and they're gonna have him on the books for a while. And Matt Moore, who I work with obviously at Action Network, wrote up a story where he feels like RJ Barrett may be like one of the next guys who's like really young that can pop somewhere else as far as a trade guy. And it's like, what could he get on an open market? Like it just depends on a lot of different things. And I think as it relates to Kevin Durant specifically, we typically don't get in NBA history a dude who's this good this late into their careers.
Right.
And Bill Simmons said on his last pod, I think it was, where there's like 4 guys at this age who average like even 20 points a game or whatever it is, and LeBron is one of the other ones. Like, go figure, and Kevin Durant does have an injury history. Kevin Durant is going to enter his 19th season. He's going to be 37 years old in September. And this is why Kirk Goldsberry last night, when he was talking to Zach Lowe, he kept hammering home the point, like Phoenix is asking for too much. And Zach Lowe made the point, like they want to recoup what they felt like they lost in the Durant trade, but all the other teams are kind of looking at them like, are you stupid? Like, you need to trade him. Like, right.
The
Kevin Durant's on the last year of his deal. He's essentially a free agent after this.
Right, and he's older, and that's the other part of this. But see, the thing is, you're not stupid to ask if there's some team desperate enough to ultimately pay, and that's where Heat fans get edgy, because you can say, okay, we're going to hold the line here. We're not willing. Let's say that the Heat offer is along the lines of, okay, Wiggins, so functional player who can help the Suns right away, but we kind of know what the upside is there. Say it's Duncan Robinson's contract, which they can, they can cut Duncan earlier and get some tax savings. Well, it doesn't seem like that's a huge priority. Or Rozier, they could take in that slot, okay, and they could get some savings there additionally as well in the last year of his deal. Then a young player who I think if it was the Heat's preference, probably the order to include the young player would be probably Larson, Jaquez, Jovic, Ware.
In the order of the most willing to least
most willing to trade, I believe. Okay, but they may be differences in the organization in terms of where they rate Larson and Jaquez at this point. I actually see more of a role for Larson with the Heat as they're currently constituted, but I don't know where they stand on that. But again, Jovic,
am I wrong to be a little surprised that you have Jovic second to last? I like Jovic a lot, but I don't get the sense like.
I just think Jovic has more up. I think Jovic has more upside than either of those two guys. But the problem with Jovic,
I agree with you. But
we've talked about that. They owe him they may he's up for an extension too, which complicates it. He's a year ahead in that process.
Although I don't think it will cost that much. But
no.
I guess my question, because this relates to Kevin Durant, who we're about to obviously talk about, but with Jovic specifically, does the building agree on him? The Heat building.
I don't think it's 100%.
I don't think it is either.
No. Well, it's pretty clear they don't really know what to do with him yet. And we've talked about that in a lot of episodes, that he's more of a concept than a factor for them. Like it's kind of like he's kind of the kind of player that I think they should want to get to, like a little more creativity and better in transition and all those kind of things. But they haven't been able to. Part of it's been injury, part of it is just youth, but they haven't been able to carve out a role, as we talked about.
One more real quick.
That's specific.
As we're talking about this trade package. If I don't want you to speak for Eric Spoelstra, but I'm going to ask you to. I'm going to ask you to. No. If you do you think, what order do you think he would put them in, the young guys, in terms of most willing to keep versus least willing to keep? I think people who listen to this would want to know this.
But I don't know what he thinks. All I know is he yells at two of the guys a lot. He yells at Ware and Jovic a lot.
Because he probably expects the most out of them.
Well, I think if you're talking about pure talent, I think it's fairly clear that of those four players, Ware and Jovic have the most pure talent, right? Is that
and then Jaquez,
any disagreement on that?
And then Jaquez and Larson in that order.
But I feel like Larson is actually the easiest of the four of them to just like plug and play.
Yeah.
So and then Jaquez showed a lot the first year, but now we're wondering, okay, was that all there was? And we'll see this season, because the third season tends to be a tell season for a lot of guys. But I think that either way, if we're looking at a package of and I ducked that completely. If we're looking at a package of Wiggins,
they'll let you know.
plus Robinson / Rozier, plus young guy, plus number 20 pick. And then it seems like Phoenix wants it seems like they want another pick down the road, which they may then use to trade for something else. If that's the case, I don't see the Heat budging much from that to get this done based on my understanding of their position on it. They're not desperate. They're not projecting desperation to get the player. They also weren't projecting desperation to get Dame, and we know they didn't get Dame. It didn't mean they weren't interested, but they were not willing to gut the team for Dame. And then Milwaukee swooped in part because they couldn't even deal with the general manager in Portland. Now, they can deal with Phoenix. There's conversations have been going on since the trade deadline. That's not the issue, even though obviously the front office structure has changed there a little bit with JJ sort of being shoved to the side. But they can deal with them. But the question is, Ishbia is a wild card because he doesn't want what most owners typically want. Like, this is not a guy who seems like he cares about tax savings or anything like that. He's just about splash. And when you're about splash, I mean, often you get wet, and that's what's happened to the Suns this past year. And I don't know that he's learned from it, because in all the interviews he did after the season, he talked about how he needs to get more involved. And I can tell you that he was heavily involved in the process when the Heat were trying to get Durant in February. So, and the whole Jimmy thing was going on. So I guess on the other side is what I want to get to is on the Heat side is how they've done when they've held the line. But I do think they are going to hold the line. I do believe that. And I think that, and that's where Heat fans are like, well, they'll never get a guy doing that. The reality is they have gotten guys doing that, just not lately. And so I want to go through that history a little bit because it seems like what this is all about right now is Phoenix doesn't have anything it likes, okay? That's why you're hearing certain people who are connected to the Phoenix front office putting it out there that other teams need to ante up more. And it also seems like Durant, in some way, okay, is making it clear he doesn't want to go to certain places, right? Like the Minnesota thing, it feels like Phoenix would want to get a deal done with Minnesota because at the very least they could get Randall, who could keep them competitive, but Durant doesn't seem to want to go there. And because of that, it's not just old tweets from 2011 where he talks about his face is freezing off when he's there. It's just the stuff that's coming out through reporters who I feel like are connected in some way to his camp. Okay. And that's the kind of thing that starts to happen here, right? Like they're doing it in a more subtle way than Dame did it. And the Dame thing blew up because the agent Goodwin made a mess of it, and that made it harder for the Heat. It seems like this is being done in a more careful way, but it's to discourage Phoenix from making a trade with Minnesota, or more so, it's to discourage Minnesota from making a trade for Kevin when he's not going to be happy there. And then it may not extend there. It doesn't seem like he'll extend there. And then, again, people are talking about, well, now Windhorst came out today, and this sounded like it came from the Phoenix front office because he said, well, they could just keep him. I don't think they could just keep him, Brian. Like I don't either. Right?
I don't either. That's generally not how this works. Like
Really?
I know with the Nets before, like it took a little bit and he stuck there a little bit longer, which you pointed out on Discord, but like that was a different situation. And the Nets reportedly worked with him in terms of like accommodating that trade. Whereas this is just icy, supposedly. And Phoenix tried to trade him without his approval or whatever. And
he didn't want to go anywhere. Now he does, right? So that's made it more complicated. The other thing about the Phoenix deal with the Nets is that Ishbia took over the team and was willing to trade Bridges. Whereas the previous owner, they weren't going to trade Bridges, but then that owner wanted to make a splash, as I said. And so he made that trade. In this case, Ishbia is the owner now, and he's going to be the owner going forward. I don't really see a scenario where this changes a lot, and I don't think you want an unhappy KD coming to camp, and I don't think that's what Booker wants either. And they're trying to turn this the right direction for Booker.
That's the other thing. Phoenix is not blowing it up.
No.
Because they want to remain competitive.
Right.
They want to keep Devin Booker. They've put it out there already.
Right.
And Devin Booker is going to be there. Bradley Beal, he's still there. We'll see what happens.
Be the last person in the building, yes.
We'll see what becomes of that. But this is the other part of this. It's not like a, hey, blow it up so that Phoenix can all of a sudden stockpile a whole bunch of picks and try to emulate whatever OKC did or try to emulate what Brooklyn may be trying to do or whatever. It's not that. It's basically like they want to get back a competitive package to then either, we don't know, but maybe they'll turn around and try to offer some of the parts, some of the picks for somebody else and try to be good again. Because look, if you have Devin Booker and you're keeping Devin Booker, by the way, is going to be entering his 11th season next year. And there's somebody who is, if not 30, approaching it. So the time would be now. Right. Like, it's
crazy.
Old. Like, like this is what it is. And in terms of, I mean, we'll talk about value and all these different things, but like, there are a couple of examples of the Heat sort of holding the line and then circling back later on, which would be the case here, and getting their guy for less. Now, in one example, it worked out beautifully. And another example,
all right, we'll get to it on the other side. Speaking of value, when you're sending money, make sure that you use Cash App. All the hosts of Five on the Floor have Cash App. Why do we have Cash App? Because it's the safest way to send money. Making money moves should be easy, and that's why there's Cash App. It's fast, safe, and honestly way more personalized than the other apps out there. No extra hoops to jump through, no extra stress. All the tools are right there to help you cash in. Plus, sending money with Cash App actually feels safe. They look out for you. Something seems sketchy. They see you might be sending money to a potential scammer. They'll warn you and make you think twice before you hit send. It's like having a personal bodyguard for your cash. If for whatever insane reason you don't already have Cash App, just download it from your phone's app store, sign up, enter our code that's on the floor in your profile. Send $5 to a friend. You get $10 just for getting started. For limited time only, new Cash App users can use our exclusive code to earn some additional cash. For real, no catch. Just download Cash App and sign up. Use our exclusive referral code on the floor in your profile. Send $5 to a friend within 14 days. You get $10 dropped right into your account. Terms apply. That's money. That's Cash App. All right, so you mentioned this. They have circled back at different times. If we're going to go all the way back to the beginning here, we only have about 10 minutes, so we got to do it quickly. If we go all the way back to the beginning, Pat Riley made a decision. First big decision he made when he came to the Heat was, I'm going to trade my best player to get Alonzo Mourning. Okay, you were going to have to pay Alonzo Mourning $100 million, basically. Mickey Harrison signed off on it. Okay, Pat reached out to him and said, this is what we got to spend. We're going to do it? He said, yes. And they got Zoe. They got the pillar of their franchise. But they had to trade their best player at the time to do it. But he's made other trades that were value trades. The trade for Tim Hardaway was a 5 players for 5 players. I think it was 4 different teams at the trade deadline. Timmy had been reduced to a 3rd stringer behind B.J. Armstrong in Golden State. The Heat gave up nothing of real significance in that trade. Like if you go take a look back at it, you'll see there wasn't much done. Jamal Mashburn became the 3rd guy in Dallas. They part of the Triple J group. He traded Kurt Thomas, former 1st-round pick, to get him. So they've traded good players to get guys. But in recent years, okay, you look at the Shaq deal. They traded their 2nd and 3rd best players. Okay, they traded Lamar Odom and Caron Butler. It was young like, okay, as long as you're not taking young players, as long as you're not taking Dwayne, okay, that's fine. We're going to build with Shaq and Dwayne. But you look elsewhere. Dragic, looking back at it, our guy Norris Cole, who again was kind of past the point where he was prominent for them at that stage. They traded him and 2 first-round picks for Goran at the deadline. You would do that deal again. They got good value on that trade. Okay, obviously with what Goran became in Miami. But more recently, there have been situations where the Heat have said, as they said at the trade deadline this year with Durant, we're not going to do that deal, but maybe we'll do a deal later. And there are 2 examples of players that recently came. One of them was Kyle Lowry. Well, let's start with Jimmy, okay? With Jimmy, there were conversations with Minnesota, with Tibbs at the time. And it was so close that I remember going to dinner and tweeting out something's coming. And there was an argument at the dinner table and all the rest of this. And I got distracted. And 2 hours later, nothing was coming because during that period of time, and they dispute this, but Sedano and others reported this, that basically Tibbs asked for Bam and Pat hung up the phone. Okay, whether or not that's actually what happened, but apparently there was some kind of a bait and switch. Yeah. But the egg ended up on my face because everything I'd heard going into that phone call was they're getting Jimmy, okay? So they didn't get Jimmy from Minnesota. They waited to get Jimmy, and they ended up getting Jimmy for nothing. Nothing.
And it has since been reported, was it J.J. Redick? Somebody from Philadelphia who was like, oh, we knew the entire time he was going to go to Miami that summer. Right. When he got to Philadelphia, like there was a dispute over a 4-year or 5-year extension and all of that kind of stuff. But they ended up getting Jimmy for Josh Richardson, a 1st, and they were even able to dump Whiteside's contract, even with the mix-up with Dallas, where they heard, was it Linnick, Dragic, where there was a whole mix-up about which player was going to go there. Thank God Goran wasn't traded, right? And the Heat ended up having to give up an extra 1st-round pick instead of taking Harkless to make that deal happen. Okay, so that circle back on him too.
They circle back on him. They circle back on Jay Crowder after numerous they went after Crowder numerous times, ended up getting Crowder with Iguodala and dumped 3 contracts in that trade. They dumped James Johnson, Dion Waiters, both of whom they wanted to get rid of, and Winslow, who Heat fans were like, oh my God, Justice, I hate to say it, never did anything again. Okay.
They were out on him. Yeah.
Okay. Because there was a dispute about how hurt he really was and all the rest of this. Right. So they managed to, so they ended up getting, they circled back on Crowder. They got him for less than other times when they made runs at him. They circled back on, I don't know if they went after Dragic previously, but they ended up getting Dragic in a really good deal. Jimmy, they circle back on, they get him a better deal. And then we talked about this one beforehand too. Kyle Lowry. Trade deadline, we thought they were getting Kyle Lowry. Masai ultimately didn't trade from Toronto. Ultimately didn't trade Lowry to them.
They got Oladipo instead.
With about 8 minutes left before the trade deadline.
Was he a circle back guy also technically? Or no? Or he got hurt, I guess.
He got hurt.
They didn't have the opportunity, but
right. But they got Oladipo like less than 10 minutes left before the deadline.
Yeah.
They gave They gave up Olynyk, right?
Olynyk,
And then
Bradley, and a bullshit pick swap.
Okay, right.
I think it was. Yeah.
And look, Vic, they took a flyer on Vic, didn't ultimately work out. But then they circled back and got Lowry as a sign and trade situation.
Sign and trade for Goran, Precious, and a pick.
Right. So I guess the overall point I'm making here is Heat fans will come back at me and say, well, what are all the guys they didn't get, right? Because they wouldn't go all in on Dame, or because Drew. I know they made a run at Drew at one point, okay, and not one of the times it was out of their hands, okay. But Heat fans will say, well, they never get guys because they don't go. But what I'm saying is there have been times they've gotten guys, and they've gotten guys at a better price than they were even willing to pay the first time, and that may be what ends up happening here, because I don't know that they're gonna. It doesn't appear, okay, that there's a team that's going to save Phoenix from itself right now. Now, there could be a Milwaukee like saved Cronin, okay? So somebody could, I'm not ruling it out. There could always a team that could be desperate enough. But right now, Brian, I'm not sure that Phoenix is going to get an offer that's better than what the Heat were willing to give them at the deadline, because that offer was headlined by Jimmy Butler. And there's no Jimmy Butler out there that anybody's trading right now.
I guess my question would then be, can they still do that? In this climate, with the current CBA, where draft picks are like they've never been more just liberally traded around from team to team for player. Can they still pull it off on their terms, or has that way of doing things kind of aged out and they need to quote unquote get with the times, so to speak, and potentially pony up more than they otherwise would have to pull off this trade or another trade or a trade in general? Because I think the pushback that Heat fans would have is they haven't done anything because they think they could always do it that way. Right. Whereas Pascal Siakam goes to the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton is in that deal.
But Brian, the one time they deviated, it blew up in their face, which is Rozier.
Well,
because they could the easier thing to do, but we would have killed them for doing it, was to just let Lowry's contract expire.
Well, we liked the Rozier trade when it happened, because
a lot of people
did on paper.
So did most of them. But what I'm saying is, yes, I did. But the point is,
so did a lot of people.
Zach
Lowe had him as a fringe, like all-star contender for that.
Nobody thought he was going to forget how to play. Okay, but and who knows how much the neck injury or confidence or whatever. But looking back at it, you're like, okay, you could have let Lowry's contract expire. You'd still be holding on to that first-round pick. But that's not what we were saying at the time. So I try to be fair about that, because that is a time that they deviated, though. That was more than value.
That's not even that big of a swing. I know it sounds crazy in hindsight, but like even at the time, you said like that's a trade that's like playing both sides.
It was a hedge trade.
A hedge trade. That's how you put it. Yeah. Where they're scooting away from the tax, as Greg puts it, because he did cost less than Lowry annually, and it's just one pick. You know what I mean? Right. So like it's kind of like. It's not.
Well, it was different than what DeJounte Murray. Well, for example, the player we were comparing to at the time was DeJounte Murray, and DeJounte Murray, I believe, cost 2 first-round picks. And again, nobody knew DeJounte Murray was going to tear his Achilles or that it wouldn't be a fit, and all the other things. He's been on 2 teams since. But we were making a comp at that point to those players, and I was saying, in comparison to that, you're holding fire a little bit, but it still was further than they typically go. Because here's the thing, and this is part of the reason I think they're having trouble making trades. They usually win the trades. Teams don't want to trade with teams that usually win the trades. This was a problem for Toronto for a long time. Okay, how many bad deals did the Knicks make with the Raptors? I mean, you know that, right? Like over and over. Like there were 3 of them. It was like, don't trade with Masai anymore. Now, I don't think Masai's had such a good run since 19, but you can, now you're looking at, okay, we got the 3 first-round picks for Siakam. He did fairly well for Anunoby. Van Vliet was a free agent, right? I don't love the Ingram trade, but it is what it is.
They turn OG Anunoby into Emmanuel Quickly and RJ Barrett.
Right. Okay. Who they may trade both. They may trade both of them now, right?
I still like Barrett. So
yeah.
And
okay,
he was really good last year. Just like 10 people watched because nobody watched Raptors games.
No, I know he was good against the Heat a couple times too. So I guess the overall point here is the Heat are kind of fighting the wave right now, in that they're trying to sort of hold the line on this. And I think the Durant situation is a good test of it, because they may be proven right on this one. I'm not saying for sure, but I think the circumstances, they may have read this one correctly. And it's similar to what Brian Geltzeiler said when he came on the podcast a couple weeks ago, where he thought Durant would end up in Miami simply because nobody else was going to offer anything that Phoenix wanted. You have to, a lot of this is not just what you're willing to give up. It's like how good your intel is on the rest of the league. And
yes,
I think they have pretty decent handle on this one, because it doesn't seem like, so far at least, that there's a Milwaukee to swoop in. Like there's a team like Milwaukee swooped in for Lillard with a package over the top. Okay. We don't see it so far. Maybe it's coming, but it hasn't come yet.
I think if the Clippers put in Zubac, it's over.
Okay. I'm with you on that, but I don't think they're going to.
But I don't. Yeah, right.
I wouldn't if I were them. And just like if I were Minnesota, I wouldn't include McDaniels.
If I'm the Heat, I don't want to include Ware.
Right.
You know,
that's
like
where we're at.
I don't. I would rather try to get the Nets to be a third team and see.
And if I'm the Spurs, I don't want to include Castle, and I don't want to give up the number 2 overall pick. And if I'm Houston, I'll give up Jalen Green, but I'm not giving up Amen Thompson. I'm not giving, so I'm saying there are levels to this, and I think they've so far, I think they've read this as KD at this stage of his career is a value player. Okay, he's not a go crazy over the top. Now I still want them to get him. Okay, because where I came to this over the past 24 hours, I was thinking back to the interview. I did a podcast where I did a short 10 minutes with Spoelstra during training camp in the Bahamas, and I asked him about the players he coached, what he learned from all of them. Curry, coaching LeBron again, being around Bam and KD, and I put it on our Discord. It's like 45-second answer he gave. And when he spoke about KD and the way that KD prepares, I just started thinking, as I played that back, I'm like, you know what? Go get him the guy. Go give him an elite player to coach.
Basically, that's what you mean.
Go give him an elite player to coach. And because the way that I heard it when I'm listening to it, I'm like, that Spo believes in players setting an example for preparation, right? And if you keep some of these young players and you have KD in there going through his daily routine, the way that he's kept himself relevant into his late 30s, I think that is a boost for some of those young players. I think it helps reinforce some of the message that he's trying to put out there. I'm not saying that Tyler and Bam don't set a good example, but I'm saying you're talking about a different level here. And I've come to this conclusion. Like, I don't think they should give up Ware, but I think if they're able to get this deal done without it, I think there could be value to this beyond just the 26 points that KD gives you on the court. He doesn't have to lead by being loud, which is something I know he doesn't want to do.
Right. And this is why I'm saying to watch the Nets, because I think the Nets can facilitate this. This has been reported in some way by a couple of people that I'm tied to, one of which, Brian Lewis, he works at the Post, and he's intimated in the past that, like, hey, they can facilitate trades because they have a lot of space. They can take back draft picks. Nets Daily has said the same thing. I used to work there. That's where I covered the Nets for a few years. And they know Sean Marks. You know what I mean? Like, they understand how he operates because they've been there the entire Sean Marks run. And Sean Marks is somebody, like, he'll take back a bad contract if it means he gets a draft pick. Like, when he's allowed to be a GM and not just go star hunting, which it doesn't seem like they're going to do that right now, especially now that Giannis is not going to be available for trade. And I think that is going to be beneficial. The thing is, though, I don't know if that works more in the Heat's favor than somebody else who actually has more draft capital to trade, because the Nets are also going to have to be compensated for their participation if this goes to 3 teams. And I'm bringing this up because a lot of these trades, Jimmy Butler became a 5-team deal. A lot of these trades become
bigger.
multiple, like 3-4 teams, because you have to move so much to make it work, especially because the Suns are limited because they can't aggregate salaries because they're in the second apron. So they can't even
Minnesota's in that position too. They can't aggregate until July 1st. So
like people will ask about, oh, can you also get like Royce O'Neal, for example? And they literally can't do it. They would have to be a separate trade altogether because of where Phoenix is financially. So the Nets could be a facilitator there. And if you have them as a facilitator, you would want them to send Phoenix Nick Claxton. Well, guess what? His contract, while it's 3 years left on it, it's descending. And it's not a terrible one. It doesn't look great like on the surface because it's 25 million and then 23, 22. But he's like a talented defensive center that can play, in theory, with Devin Booker. And it's like, okay, instead of you sending Ware, can you make that happen? But then the Nets will have to be compensated. So like, good luck trying to figure all that out. So I think holding the line is interesting. I do wonder if it's something they could still afford to do in this example. I don't think you mortgage the entire future. And I do have questions about, because I think they should get Kevin Durant on value, to your point.
Yeah.
I don't think it should cost you everything for a 37-year-old entering year 19. Like, the cost is everything to me in terms of why this works. And I have questions still about, all right, how do you build a team then around Kevin Durant, Bam, and Tyler Hero? Because we're expecting them to run with those three and be like, all right, you're going to lead this charge to take on the East. I have no idea what this looks like, and because I don't know what's going to be around them and how you're going to have the role players around them. So there's a lot of questions to be asked.
But no disrespect. We love Haywood and I love his pizza over at Mr. 01, but it's a whole lot different trying to create offense with Kevin Durant in your front court than Haywood Highsmith or some of the others that they've tried in recent years. So I feel like they'd have a better shot, but we've talked about some of the issues, durability. We did a whole podcast about that. And also building around a jump shooter. There's issues with that as well. Before we close here, I'll just mention this. You mentioned the Nets. I know there's a good relationship between the Heat and the Nets too at the highest levels, and I feel like sense.
Those are two of the smartest front offices in the NBA, in my opinion.
There are relationships between those front offices, and I kind of feel like that. I remember Sean Marks played for Miami too briefly,
and Sean Marks has been there for 9 years. So like, there's a level of familiarity you're going to have there, relative to like most other organizations. So
this is one of the reasons I wish JJ still had some power in Phoenix, but he doesn't, it appears. I'll see JJ back in Pembroke Pines soon. Anyway,
what's on the Haywood Highsmith pizza, by the way? What toppings are on that?
Oh, is that honey? I will say this though, the Caleb Martin pizza, I hate to say it, better.
Really?
Okay. Yeah, it was better. But it's good. I had it last week. All right. Follow me, Bryan Fonseca, NY, for other pizza advice. And he's in New York, so he's got better options.
We have great pizza up here.
he's got
you know options. That.
He's got better options. Just stay away from Ray's. I don't want people to go to chains. Anyway, have a good day.